Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to start off with the Ukrainian president. Zelensky sent condolences to the U.S., saying that he was deeply saddened by the tragedy in Texas. In fact, tweeted out, deeply saddened by the news of the murders of innocent children in Texas. Sincere condolences to the families of the victims, the people of the U.S. and POTUS over this tragedy. The people of Ukraine share the pain of the relative and friends of the victims and all Americans. And they're basically being bombed into the Stone Age by a maniacal dictator, and got time to send thoughts and prayers and condolences. Now that I'll take that from him, because he has no power, no control, no ability to make change here. I'll take it from nobody else. President Obama said that our country is paralyzed, not by fear, but by a gun lobby and a political party that have shown no willingness to act in any meaningful way that might help prevent these tragedies. Yeah, truth. But the NRA did. The NRA did send their deepest sympathies to the families, and not just their sympathies, but their deepest sympathies. And thank goodness for that, right? And what happened in Texas was the 27th school shooting this year, the 119th since 2018, and the highest number since last year, 34. So we're getting there. Well, we still got a whole half a year to go yet. I predict the way things have been going, we should, to use a gun nut term, we should blow that out of the water. And the thing that bothers me is each one of these 27 this year, the 34 last year, the 119 since 2008, has followed a pretty simple, normal, predictable path. You have this horrible shooting, you have this horrible event, you have this outcry, there's a media frenzy feeding, it's everything about the shooter, everything about every minute of every day, the tears, just all kinds of just constant media stuff. And then the thoughts and prayers. Lots of people, oh yeah, how tragic. Oh, then we're going to hear the stories of, these wonderful children. We're going to get all this. We're going to be inundated with all of this stuff. And then social media is going to, ramp up, and you're going to have the gun debates, and we're having this. We'll be having the one side, we should ban all guns. The other side, no, we need more guns. And you're going to have all this. You're going to have the noise, and it's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. And nobody politically is going to do anything. And we're going to go through some of this because they're not. And then it quiets down until the next time. And then again, same thing. You have this horrible tragedy. And it's the same thing. The media frenzy, you have this, just constant, and then thoughts and prayers, and social media debate over the guns and no guns and all this stuff. And then no one actually does anything. And then it calms back down. And then it happens again. And it's just constant, it's this cycle. And it's gotten to be it's gotten to the point, quite frankly, that the windows have gotten smaller. that we go through these stages a lot quicker now because, well, that happened. That was yesterday. What's going on today? And we don't hold on to anything. And you look at Twitter, you look at social media, it's the same. You could just change the dates and it would be the same debate. It would be the same discussion. In fact, I deliberately tweeted out a cartoon. And, I always think of cartoons as something, funny. This isn't funny. It's an image of the Republican Party and the NRA, carrying their assault weapon, holding hands, walking away from a field of bloody bodies. With the caption "Blood Brothers," saying, we've accomplished so much together. And the reason I put that out is not for the shock value of the image, because we're not shocked by any of this stuff. I put it for the date. The date was 11/8/2018. And you could use that image over and over and over and over again. Because back in 2018, that was shocking. Now it's like, yeah, it's Wednesday. And when the next one comes, I'll have it ready for the next one. And this is how this has gone. And this is why this moment is so frustrating. Because as Chris Murphy pointed out yesterday, this doesn't happen around the world. This doesn't happen in the rest of the world. Because, well, they do things. Their governments actually do something. And I look at Joe Manchin's statement. Joe Manchin. He says it makes no sense at all why we can't do common sense things and try to prevent some of this from happening. It's all just unbelievable how we've gotten as a society that someone could be that deranged and this sick. No, they're not deranged and sick. I'm not going to give you that out. They had a weapon of destruction that you have gone, okay, go ahead. So he's asked, what are you going to do? And he goes, well, I'm going to do anything I can. I'm going to do anything I can to pass common sense legislation to address the gun violence. We're going to do anything we can do, anything we can do to address this issue. So someone said, hey, well, in order to pass it, you're going to need to address filibuster reform. Whoa. Can't do that. No. Whoa. When I said anything, I didn't mean anything. What I really meant is I'm not going to do anything. I'll do nothing in my quest to do anything. And this is my problem. And this is where the frustration is, because we don't hold these people accountable. Oh, the headline is Joe Manchin will do anything. And then you read the body of the article, he's really going to do nothing. And you find out that these people they're well secured. Because the sergeant of arms of the House wants to ban all guns in the Capitol. They're going to be in a gun-free zone. They're going to be safe. We find out that Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, after the shooting, instead of going to work on figuring out how to make sure this doesn't happen again, went to a fundraiser over 300 miles away. Yeah. And today, the news of Beto O'Rourke going to, and good on Beto O'Rourke. I'm not a huge fan. I've never really been a huge fan, but good on him for saying, you know what? Enough already. He said, you're doing nothing. You're offering us nothing. You said this is not predictable. This is totally predictable. And it is. These things are totally predictable. And it's about time that people stand up and say something. It's about time that people stop playing by the Marquess of Queensberry rule. Stop saying, Mother, may I. I'm actually proud of Beto O'Rourke for, stepping forward in this moment and saying, enough already. And you got these people, now is not the time. No, now is the perfect time. to be talking about this. Now is the perfect time to be pointing fingers at these elected leaders who have done nothing. I look at Representative Ronnie Jackson, Trump's boy, who, Second Amendment guy, who's now blaming, this is, where did you pull this out of? Did you fall back into 1980? Evidently, this is video games and rap music. That's why this is. It's not the guns, evidently. No, need more guns. And my email box was full of, no, this is the broken family. And you go, hey, dimwits, do you believe that there are broken families in other countries? Do you believe they've got rap music and video games in other countries? Yes, they do. You know what they don't have? They don't have 118 mass shootings since school shootings since 2018. 119. I'm sorry. They don't have 119 school shootings in that time period. No, they don't have that. We're unique in that. And why is it? It's not the rap music. It's not the video games. It's not the broken families. Everybody has that. Gee, it could be the gun. Could be the gun. I think. Don't quote me on the. No, absolutely quote me on it. It's the gun. And I've been sitting here thinking about Republican logic, because it's always, we got to blame something else. We got to distract in certain ways. And I'm sitting here in my mind going, it's crazy that nothing can get done. Do you remember right after the memo was leaked about Roe? That, oh my gosh, the Supreme Court leak, that was all about the leak. We're going to get that leaker. When you know who the leaker probably was, it was a justice's wife, a certain Supreme Court justice's wife who has a history of doing something like this, who wants Roe to end. And people went to the justice's house and protest. Very peaceful. In fact, they went to Amy Coney Barrett's house and dressed up in Handmaid's Tales costumes and had candlelight vigils. They went to Susan Collins' house and they drew with chalk on the ground. Oh my gosh! They defaced the sidewalk with chalk. Oh my goodness! Immediately, the Republicans and our whole establishment, they came together, and in days they acted to solve what was a crisis, because the Supreme Court and their Senate brothers and sisters, that's who's important to them. They don't care about us. They don't care about our kids. Oh, thoughts and prayers. Yeah, about that. They don't care about, when they care about something, look how efficiently they can move. They passed a piece of legislation in a day to protect the Supreme Court, to protect Susan Collins. In fact, in Maine, not only did she not have to wait for it to rain to get the chalk off of her sidewalk, they called out the Department of Public Works to come and wash her sidewalk. That's how important that was to them. That's how efficiently things work. But our children? No, we can't possibly pass any sane laws. We can't do anything. Then there's the other part of this. I listened to the Ted Cruz's. I listened to the gun nuts going, we need to arm our teachers. We need to get guns into the hands of teachers. And I was sitting here thinking about this. I'm going, hold on. Wasn't it just the day before that you were calling teachers sexual predators and groomers and how they couldn't be trusted with our kids? And now you want to give predators guns? Now you want to give these horrible leftist, horrible people guns? I mean, do you see how insane this rhetoric is? I mean, there's no logic whatsoever to what they're saying. But we need those teachers with guns to keep our kids safe. But we can't depend on them to help them learn to read and write. We can't ensure that they help our children learn to critically think. No. We need some crazy mythical pastor. Deep breath. This is where we're having such problems. Ted Cruz came out today. Said, we need to, this, I love this. Again, this is another one of those, help me through this, Ted. I got to think this Republican logic through. We need schools that have just one exit and entrance. Just one. Just highly fortified, heavily guarded, heavily armed. Just one. That's how we're going to keep our kids. In fact, we'll take those hardened cockpit doors that we didn't use for the airplanes for years, going to put them on the schools. And my first thought was, okay, where's the legislation? Oh, you weren't really serious, were you? No, you just wanted to speak. I got it. Because where's the funding bill that you're going to vote against? Because what you're talking about is millions and millions of dollars in retrofitting schools. But again, you weren't really serious. You're just, flapping the gums because you don't have any solutions, but you're throwing everything out there, the spaghetti theory, because you're so desperate to get away from what is right in front of everyone. It's the easy access to these murder machines. That's what it is. And if Ted Cruz isn't bad enough, and I find Ted Cruz despicable, I look at this Gozer character, Arizona Republican Paul Gozer, who evidently he thought it was a good idea to spread false, evidently the right wing in doing what they do because they saw a good tragedy, 19 dead kids and a couple of teachers, 3 teachers. This is an excellent opportunity to go beat up on the trans community. Evidently, they found these images of this person who I guess lives in Georgia, and they said that evidently this is the person. And the tweet that he went out and he spread, this is the trans people. This is that's the shooter's transgender, and what? Again, never let a good crisis go to waste when you have an agenda. And your agenda is to divide, not to solve our problems. Again, these people have no answers. All they want is tragedy and division. And this is where elections have consequences. Right now, we should be in the streets screaming. Don't take to social media. Don't care what your thoughts are on social media at this moment, because it's the same as it's been the last time and the time before. It'll go away tomorrow and we'll forget about it the day after until the next tragedy. It's time to really start getting in the streets and really holding these people accountable. That's just my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break right back after this. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you got a quick thought, want to hear it. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'm still stuck in this moment. You look at the fact that when our government wants to move, when our Republicans want something done, man, they can move quickly. When it's important to them, when it's important to corporate interest, when they're covering their own behind, man, they can move lickety-split. When it comes to us, when it comes to protecting workers, when it comes to protecting consumers, when it comes to protecting minority groups, when it comes to protecting our children, nowhere to be found. And a perfect example of this, right after that Supreme Court, leak, immediately Florida sprung into action. And their legislature passed a law, no protesting at people's homes. No, you can't go to politicians' homes. You can't go to justices' homes. You can't go to, no protesting at homes. Because look, we don't want you going to the CEO of the people who make the AR-15s and putting a microphone in the CEO and going, hey, how does it feel to live in this huge mansion where you make all this blood money? Yeah, we don't hear much of that, do we? And maybe we should be. But hey, in Florida, there's a law. It's against the law to go protest in front of, and maybe this is where all the CEOs are now going to live because, well, your freedom of speech has been just diminished because it's important that it's diminished. It's important that it's squelched. It's important that you're silenced because you don't matter. And again, this circle, you have these horrible tragedies. The media goes crazy because everyone's paying attention. Everyone wants the details, the bloody, gory, horrible details, and then thoughts and prayers, lots of those. We care about the children. Then we go through the debates, we go through the outrage, we go through all that, and nothing gets done. Nothing gets done, and then it goes away. We throw up our hands, go no. Next time, we're going to do something next time. And we don't even cross our fingers anymore. And this is the problem I have with all of this. This is my problem with Republican and some Democrats. Look, Kirsten Sinema, she's saying, about, the DC solutions on guns are not realistic. Well, what are those? We haven't even debated those. The reality is the vast majority of people want background checks. Why can't we get background checks? Why can't we get that done? Oh, that's right, because people like you, Kirsten, people like Joe Manchin, going, well, we're not going to do anything on the filibuster, sorry. Because you got people like Tony Gonzalez proud of the fact that he voted against any sane gun regulation. And then on the day of a tragedy in his district, thoughts and prayers. A weird, creepy Bible verse of the children going to God. Am I the only one who sees this as wrong? Am I the only one who sees this as angering? And look, I have people who go to me, well, it's just not the children. Yeah, this is what gets us outraged. There are killings every day. And again, it comes back to there's a common denominator here. It's the fact that we've got more guns than we've got people. Why don't we have a system that says you got to insure your car, you've got to insure your dog, but you don't have to insure your gun? You don't even have to register your gun. I know, but it's my right to have one. In fact, in 32 states, you don't even have to know how to use a gun to own one. You don't even have to fire it to own it and carry it around. You don't think that's kind of wrong? And it's all because, well, our leaders are totally ineffective. Because the money machine, the gun lobby, they got us by the short hairs. Right where they want us. They're making money, and our children, they're being sacrificed. They're being sacrificed at the altar of profit. Sad stuff. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day trucking bosses and leading Teamsters in Minneapolis reached a tentative agreement after a tumultuous week of fighting in the city market. Strikers won many of their demands, including union recognition and the reinstatement of all strikers. Such a thorough victory at the Battle of Deputies Run earlier in the week had shaken the city's elites to their core. As the dust settled on the picket lines, Governor Floyd Olson had called a 24-hour truce in an effort to organize negotiations. The debacle of Ohio National Guardsmen attacking Toledo strikers had reached Minneapolis. Fears of a growing red menace fueled demands for a settlement, prompting Olson to order National Guardsmen into the city's armories armed to the teeth. Historian Brian Palmer, author of Revolutionary Teamsters, The Minneapolis Trucker Strikes of 1934, observed that the May 25th deal settled the strike quickly enough, but final victory would be postponed. Strike leaders had to choose which concessions to make under immense pressure from state politicians, intractable employers, and federal mediators. They also worked to avoid a potentially deadly confrontation with the National Guard. Above all, they demanded union recognition, agreed to arbitration of future disputes, and withdrew the demand for a closed shop. There was no contract, and the inclusion of inside workers proved contentious. Palmer adds the gains were limited but real enough, as strike leaders spelled out what had begun as a violent assault on strikers ended with workers fighting in their own interests, learning that they had only their union to rely on. The open shop offensive was defeated, and union recognition was won. In the weeks ahead, it would become clear the fight was far from over. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
I never dreamed of growing up to be a political activist commentator, but here I am, and it worked out pretty well for me. I've been lucky enough to have a voice in public matters and eke out a modest living running my mouth as an independent populist agitator. Still, I have to confess to the sin of job envy, not in the sense of being resentful, but regretful about my own inability to lift the trade of journalistic commentary to the heights attained by a small, feisty collection of unique public opinionators, political cartoonists. In framing issues and rallying people to think and act, these journalists have an unfair advantage over us mere word crafters. They can literally draw a picture to make their point. They reach masses viscerally as well as cerebrally, and visceral usually outpunches cerebral. Editorial cartooning is a profession made up largely of progressive mavericks who enter the social, political, cultural fray with an abundance of anti-establishment audacity, an eye for irony, fondness for the underdog, and an ability to laugh at absurdity, plus artistic talent. Because cartooning is an expression of the human spirit that's been irrepressible since cave drawings, generation after generation of pen and ink champions of democracy blossomed. The general public's appreciation and demand for the cartoonist's unblinking honesty and satire have never flagged, even increasing whenever the artists come under public assault by autocrats, plutocrats, screwballs, and assorted other censors. These graphic editorial artists matter. Again and again, they've roused the public to rise up and put down corporate and political scoundrels, incrementally advancing our nation's democratic possibilities. As in the natural world, though, even the most beneficial creatures can be driven to extinction. This is Jim Hightower saying, check your own local newspaper. Are your favorite cartoonists still there?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like a recount is going to happen here in Pennsylvania in the Senate race on the Republican side, as Dr. Oz, as I've been calling him, Dr. Quack, holds a very slim lead in the Senate race over David McCormick. I guess just 902 votes. That will happen. The Department of State announced that there will be a official recount I do find it interesting that the Trumpkins are saying, no, no, we can't possibly let that happen. This is bad. And yet McCormick saying, no, no, we want to count every vote. It's been kind of entertaining on a certain level to watch it's been entertaining, to say the least, to watch this whole thing play out in a way that's, well, very predictable. At least that's my thought on it. But this election cycle in Pennsylvania is going to be very interesting, and here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked our good friend Will Bunch to come talk with us. Will is a national columnist for the Philly Daily Inquirer. You can check out his work there. Will, thanks for taking time for us. Okay, looks like we don't have Will. So this is one of those live radio moments where evidently Will's not his microphone is not working. But he's got a really great piece out, and this is I've been talking about Doug Mastriano for a while, and the fact that not thrilled with him as the gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans. He won overwhelmingly in the election there. I do find it kind of scary to have someone as much of an extremist as we have there. But I think we got Will here on the line. Will, how are you?
I'm good, Rick.
So walk me through. Have you been following the Senate race here in Pennsylvania?
It's funny you ask this because I actually tweeted about this the other day. I mean, of course, I've been following it, obviously, and I want to stay informed. And as you mentioned, listeners probably know, so they're starting this recount. Mehmet Oz is up by 900 votes. If you had to bet your life savings, you'd probably want to bet it on Oz at this stage. Unless there's a court decision that gives McCormick access to some of these mail-in ballots that are being contested, I guess. But the thing I tweeted about this the other day is, I'm thinking about the big picture, right? And the big picture is who's going to be elected to the Senate in November, and it's going to be either the Democrat John Fetterman, or it's going to be one of these two people, either Oz or McCormick. And to me, there's just not a dime's worth of difference between Oz and McCormick, in terms of, they're both not really Pennsylvanians. They're both out of state. They're both multimillionaires. They both are people who, while you probably wouldn't have totally agreed with their politics 5 years ago, at least they were like kind of sane, rational human beings back in the last 5 or 10 years, and then they totally lost their mind to suck up to Donald Trump to try and get his endorsement, which Oz got and McCormick didn't get. So I'm just really not caring that much whether Oz and the reason that if you want a more progressive Senate and you want a more progressive state and you want the Democrats to be able to hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe get something done in 2023, you want the opponent that Fetterman has the best chance of beating, right? And I'm not sure who that is. Probably McCormick, just because McCormick's kind of a drip, but and Oz is very telegenic and very good on TV. But Oz, on the other hand, has alienated some people in the Republican base because they know about his past life when he was basically a middle of the road guy, and who was pro-choice on abortion probably, and didn't think that transgender kids were going to burn in hell and all of that stuff. So.
Yeah, but that never really seemed to matter for Trump, though. Since he's got the Trump endorsement, he's with us now. So he's evolved. He's crazy now. So he's okay. I see the Republicans coalescing around. He's crazy now. Well, we can forgive that past stuff, much like they did with Trump.
Yeah. Well, no, I think Oz is potentially the more dangerous foe for Fetterman because, like I said, he's very good. I saw him on the campaign trail a couple of weeks ago up in Bucks County. I went to an event, and he's very, he's good in person. He's glib. He's good on TV. That's what he does for a living, right? And Right. He has that Trump endorsement to.
He's got better ratings.
Yeah, he has that Trump endorsement to protect his support from the GOP base, and he probably will have some crossover appeal just from TV fans who aren't that super political, right? So he's a little bit more of a dangerous candidate.
Yeah.
But
do you find it ironic, like I do, that this is going to come down to mail-in ballots, and that this could come down to ones that don't have dates on them? Because last week you had I think it was the third district court of appeals that ruled that a judicial race back in 2021, that the ballots that were arrived on time but didn't have a date on them could be counted. And I think this is why McCormick has filed this suit, to make sure that those ballots get counted, because hey, wherever you can get them. I think it's interesting that we're fighting over the dates and the ballots, and we're right back where we were in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that people are focusing on, and I totally agree, and I understand why they're focusing on this, is just the hypocrisy here. Although I guess the Pennsylvania State Republican Party is trying to look a little bit less hypocritical, so they're taking the Trump position, to count fewer ballots instead of more, basically. But I mean, to me, at this stage of America, Republican hypocrisy is kind of like a water is wet kind of story. I mean, hypocrisy is basically their brand. So the fact that they would be so disingenuous about mail-in ballots doesn't surprise me. I mean, again, I think of the big picture. The big picture is the Republican Party is a party that doesn't want to count all the votes, and I think we're seeing that mindset again here. Big picture, I worry a lot more about the fact that these guys, have already curtailed and want to drop-in voting boxes. The end of voting by mail, and anything that makes voting more easier or more feasible is something that they are going to kill if they, if they're going to successfully kill if they win the governor's race. Although if Doug Mastriano wins the governor's race, that's just one of our many problems in Pennsylvania if that happens. But this is a party that wants to make it hard to vote. The 2020 election, the reality of the 2020 election was, aside from the fact that Biden won, which was very helpful, but in addition, it was just from a pure democracy standpoint, it was that election was a smashing success. Voting by mail worked very well in Pennsylvania, and it helped increase turnout. And we should all want more voter turnout. And I honestly, and I'm not being facetious here. I want to see more people vote because I want to see more people vote, not because it helps Democrats. Now, generally, it does happen to help Democrats, as it turns out. But to me, that's not the reason. I would love to see, I don't know, as you know, some nations have mandatory voting. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that as a rule, but I would love to see us get as close to 100% voting as we can, and let the chips fall where they may, and let's have a real election with everybody voting and see what happens. And that's not the Republican philosophy right now, and that's part of what you're seeing, with this maneuvering about.
Yeah, it's interesting that the party has taken the position. No, all of our voters don't really count, so we're going to go that route.
You're insulting your own vote. Obviously they're making it harder on some level for a number of Democrats to vote, but they're also making it harder for their own people to vote. It's really, it just shows how they can tie themselves into knots once that becomes their kind of default position that, not everybody should vote.
That's crazy. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Will Bunch. He's a national opinion columnist over at the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can check out his work over at the Philly Inquirer, inquirer.com, the website. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Now, you got a piece out on Mastriano. Homophobia is Mastriano's driving force. That seems like a bit harsh. It seems a bit harsh, even though I've heard the man speak. It's actually fairly accurate.
Yeah, if you watch, he gave a standard, 15-minute victory speech after he won the primary last week. And I, in the interest of journalism, I forced myself to watch the whole thing. And, to me, it was laced with a kind of homophobia. For your listeners who are not in Pennsylvania, it may take a little explaining, although I think most people in Pennsylvania understand this, is that, we had this situation where when you had the pandemic, the Pennsylvania Health Commissioner, I have to confess that, like, if you asked me, 10 years ago, who was, Ed Rendell's health commissioner, I would, struggle to remember who that was, but this was, of course, I don't really cover state government intensively, but on a regular basis. But when the pandemic came, the health commissioner the health secretary, suddenly became the most important position in state government.
Right.
And Tom Wolf, give him credit, he appointed this highly qualified doctor who happens to be a transgender woman, Rachel Levine, to that post, which was a very, I think courageous move on his part. I think he picked Dr. Levine because she was the best person for the job, but also happened to be transgender. So God bless him. But when you all of a sudden when you had the state issuing these important, dictates, orders, whatever, around the COVID-19 pandemic, and they were coming from a transgender woman, you can imagine Trump world freaked out, right? And so as Rick, driving around Pennsylvania, there were just like billboards and just all kinds of attacks on, Levine, who, and again, she's not, really the governor is ultimately responsible for the state policy, but Levine became the face of Pennsylvania's policy, and, Republicans have played it up to the max, that this is, to them, this is a sign of America's decline, that you have a transgender person in this important position, which is ridiculous, and so Mastriano, if he gets elected, in terms of policy, he's going to go full, like he's, red southern states. He's going to try and put in bathroom laws about, whatever gender you had at birth. He would ban transgender athletes from playing sports. And the bigger picture here, you can say, well, these laws affect not a large number of people. Well, first of all, everybody has human rights, no matter how many people are affected, number one. But number two, also, it's just part of this broader climate of fear that's really targeting not only transgender people, and they're incredibly important, but it's also just a climate of fear for the entire LGBTQ plus community in Pennsylvania, which now you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people and their families who love them, and they have to go to school in this state where the government is basically kind of waging a holy war against them, and it's important. And one of the reasons I wrote this column is I also wanted to go a little bit deeper in the fact that homophobia and just kind of this anti-LGBTQ plus mindset is kind of central to authoritarianism. And I never thought in my life, when I entered journalism 40 years ago, I never thought I would cover a race for a state governorship where the issue was that the potential governor could be like an authoritarian, a dictator, basically. But,
no, I went further than that. I've been calling him Benito Mastriano. I think he's a Nazi. And I fear that, we head in you use the word authoritarian, we head in a very fascistic direction where we're bullying and we're beating up on the least, on the weakest, because this is who they are. And there's that kind of, and his speech was not just, dog whistle. He was full out saying, we're not moving to the center. We're going crazy to the extremes. And that kind of mentality makes me think of, of what I learned about World War II and the Nazi era. Yeah. That first they came for you fill in the blank group, but by the time they got for me, there's nobody left. This is that kind of moment.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at, we have one of the largest suburban school districts in Pennsylvania is this Central Bucks School District, which covers a big chunk of Bucks County, just north of Philadelphia, Doylestown and areas like that. And, Mastriano, even, and hopefully he won't ever be governor, but whether or not he becomes governor, even now, the school district, they're fighting over everything about, books in the library that they say are sexualized, and whether classrooms can display, rainbow flags, and although they did reverse course after it went public, but they initially tried to dissuade the kids from doing the student version of Rent as their school musical because it has gay themes in it, and it's really, this is like, Weimar Republic, what was that movie, Cabaret, it's kind of like pre-Nazi, we're going after the permissive culture, it's scary out there, and Mastriano would make it 10 times worse. When he won the nomination, which, wasn't really a surprise, and we saw this coming for weeks, but when he did win the nomination, I wrote another column that was ran in the paper Sunday. I wrote a column basically saying this is going to be, not my sole focus because there's too many other things like the shooting in Texas this week, but which I just wrote about but hasn't been published yet. But this Mastriano story is going to be my main focus between now and November, because I feel like I don't want to wake up on November 4th and feel like I hadn't explored and warned people about every possible thing that this guy could do as governor, and then the biggest thing, as is that he could not count our votes, that he could appoint a Secretary of State who would share his philosophy about the big lie, that Donald Trump really won in 2020 and that there was massive election fraud. In fact, I'm kind of starting to work on a column. I don't know when it will appear, probably in the next few weeks, but looking at the fact that, I think if Mastriano was elected, it's kind of hard to believe, but I think the first thing he would do as governor is try and decertify Joe Biden's 2020 election victory. That's how crazy these people are. So.
No, and look, the other part of this is, let's not we forget he was at the January 6th insurrection, and he was one of the guys who was organizing bus trips down there. He's one of those guys who, I'm hoping possibly he gets thrown.
There's a serious question, right, about whether that provision in the 14th Amendment about people who, participated in an uprising, the thing that resulted in that Marjorie Taylor Greene court hearing a couple of weeks ago, this provision that people who participated in a uprising or insurrection against the United States government, which initially was meant to be the Civil War and the Confederacy, could that be invoked against Doug Mastriano? I've seen people seriously raise that question, and it is a legitimate question. His involvement. The only thing. We don't know where he ended up. Right. We don't know. If he got on to restricted property, in which case he would have been absolutely a lawbreaker on January 6th. But like you said, we know he had the 3 or 4 buses that he sent down there. We know that he was, him and his friend Rick Saccone and some other people marched right up to the Capitol, and they were there when bad things were going on. And he's got people working on his staff. He's got a guy working on his staff. One of the people who is part of the goon squad that keeps reporters out of covering his rallies is a guy who not only was there January 6th, but was one of the people cheering on thugs who destroyed journalists' camera equipment that day, if you remember. This is who these people are.
And that's how he'll govern. And that's the part that I think people. And look, I think that's part of the appeal. I think that the people who would vote for him want that kind of. Want that kind of leadership. They want that kind of government so they can put those libtards in place, and that's what's scary about the moment that we're in. And we're going to see what happens. But Will, I appreciate the time and the work you do. Fantastic stuff. I hope people will check it out. We'll get links out on social media. But as always, good stuff, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Rick. It was a pleasure. Good talking to you.
As always, our good friend Will Bunch, opinion columnist there at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Make sure you check out his work. We'll get links out on social media. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1986. That was the day that more than 5 million people participated in Hands Across America. The event was organized to raise money to combat the problems of homelessness and hunger in the United States. People agreed to donate $10 to stand in their place in line for 15 minutes. The line was supposed to link people hand in hand from New York City through 17 states to Long Beach, California. The event gained support of corporate donors, including the Coca-Cola Company and Citibank. Initially, the plan drew the ire of President Ronald Reagan, who claimed, quote, "I don't believe that there is anyone going hungry in America by reason of denial or lack of ability to feed them. It is by people not knowing where or how to get this help." The president refused to acknowledge how factors like the loss of industrial jobs and the decline of labor unions contributed to families having hard times making ends meet. Eventually, President Reagan got on board, forming part of the chain in Washington, D.C. He was joined in line across the country by everyone from Oprah to Chewbacca and Mickey Mouse. The event was projected to raise $50 million, but not everyone turned in their pledged contributions, and staffing costs ate into profits. In the end, the project raised about $20 million. In 2015, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development reported that there were more than 500,000 people homeless in the United States. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's a scary prospect, the idea that you're going to have someone like Mastriano as governor of a state like Pennsylvania. And look at what's going on in Michigan with the fraud that's going on there with the signatures. You've got the 5, candidates for governor there who, amazingly, they had tens of thousands of votes. Tens of thousands of signatures. What they 68,000 fraudulent signatures. But these are the people who are saying it's those Democrats who are doing all this fraudulent stuff. Yeah, and this isn't the first time in Michigan they've gotten caught. It was like a decade ago that, what was his name? McCotter? Thaddeus McCotter. His office got caught. They had a number, I think 4 or 5 staffers who got charged with a slew of felonies and misdemeanors for doing just that. Didn't want to actually go out and do the hard work of gathering signatures. They just went and wrote people's names down. And you'll remember Acorn? How the right just jumped on it. Acorn's doing this. The fraud was actually committed against Acorn because they turned it in. They said, look, we've got these ballots. We think these registrations, we think they're fraudulent. You should check them out. And the right just lost their mind over it and go, see, look, they're cheating. And again, as I always say, it's amazing how the people who keep pointing stuff out and go, it's them over there, seem to be the ones that are doing it. And I do find it interesting that now with these 5 gubernatorial candidates in Michigan being knocked out because they couldn't get enough signatures, the Trump guy, the Trump people are now at the top of the ticket. So you could have someone crazy in Michigan too. Scary, scary times. But I wonder if anyone's going to go to jail over this. It would be interesting to see the former Detroit police chief behind bars for the 11,100 fraudulent signatures that he turned in. Because evidently you need 15,000 valid ones, and he turned in 11,100 fraudulent ones. I guess he just didn't feel like going knocking on doors those days. It's just, wow. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the show, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about, hey, who killed overtime? I want to know. Back after this.
Australians have chosen a government that will act on climate change.
Big win for climate and living things in Australia's national elections. Global warming made record South Asia heatwave more likely and much worse. Plus, grid regulator warns most of the U.S. is at risk of blackouts this summer.
Oh, fantastic. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Oh, beautiful for smoggy skies, insecticided grain, for strip-mined mountains, majesty above the asphalt plain. America, America, man sheds his waste on thee and hides the pines with billboard signs from sea to oily sea.
Thank you, George Carlin. You are missed. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we've got some actual good news today in the Green News Report, so knowing you, you're probably going to leave it till the end.
That's true. First, the bad news.
Right.
Another round of early extreme heat walloped the eastern seaboard of the United States over the weekend, and that came along with a warning. A new assessment by U.S. grid regulator, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, warns that extreme temperatures and ongoing drought could cause the power grid to buckle in vast swaths of the country, potentially leading to electricity shortages and blackouts.
So because the heat this year will be worse than it has been in previous years, that is what it's going to do in the electric grid?
Yes, it stresses the equipment. And the assessment blames climate change because NOAA has forecast a hotter than average summer for the U.S. this year. That will strain equipment, and because drought conditions threaten water supplies that are used to cool off thermal power plants across the Midwest. So keep that in mind. Now is a great time to get prepared.
Yeah, good luck.
Russia is again using energy as a weapon. Russia shut off natural gas deliveries to Finland over the weekend in retaliation for Finland applying for membership in NATO, and because Finland refused Russia's new demand that it now pay in rubles.
And I suspect Finland doesn't even care.
They do not. Finland's state-owned gas wholesaler says it has been preparing for this exact situation since before Russia invaded Ukraine and expects to have ample supply, barring any disruptions in gas transmission, like, say, a cyber attack on a pipeline.
Uh-oh.
The intense months-long heat wave that has been gripping India and Pakistan was made 30 times more likely because of man-made global warming. That's according to a new assessment by climate scientists at the World Weather Attribution Network. Global warming made the record-setting early heat wave in South Asia hotter and 30 times more likely than a similar event would have been in pre-industrial times. The heat wave caused at least 90 deaths across India and Pakistan, triggered forest fires and floods from fast-melting glaciers in the Himalayas, and stunted India's wheat crop, helping to fuel an emerging global food crisis. The scientists warn that future heat waves will likely be even hotter and occur even more frequently than today unless governments act to curb emissions.
And of course they won't.
Some good news. A new report by the International Energy Agency finds that global sales of electric cars hit 2 million in the first 3 months of 2022, not quite double over the same period of last year. But less good news. The IEA shows that the U.S. is still playing catch-up, still falling behind global EV market leaders China and Europe in expanding battery supply chains and EV manufacturing. Most advanced batteries today are sourced from Asia. And finally, some great news for people and things that live and breathe in Australia, where voters overcame a relentless barrage of climate disinformation from Rupert Murdoch's media empire to oust the conservative Australian government in favor of the left-leaning Labor Party that had pledged swift action on climate change to cut Australia's emissions and expand renewable energy. Out is abrasive conservative coal-promoting Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who once brandished a lump of coal in Parliament to attack climate policy, and who also pushed expansion of coal mining and exports. Polls show climate was a top concern for voters after a slew of record-breaking bushfires and flood disasters since the last election just 3 years ago. Here's new Labour Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
We have an opportunity now to end the climate wars in Australia. Australian business know that good action on climate change is good for jobs and good for our economy, and I want to join the global effort.
It matters because Australia right now has the least ambitious plans of all of the developed nations to address the climate crisis.
That is good news, but until they kick out Rupert Murdoch, until we kick out Rupert Murdoch, the climate wars, I'm afraid, are never going to end.
Good point.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So with all the talk of inflation, all the talk of, all the organizing going on around the country, people are finally waking up that wages have been stagnant for way too long. And the other part that nobody really talks about is, the death of overtime. I've been talking about it for years that, when I started working, the 8-hour day was sacrosanct. There was none of this, overtime after 40. No, you got overtime after 8 hours. There was none of this, hey, well, we'll work you 40 straight hours and then you get overtime. No. And this was what unions built. This idea that you work 8 hours, anything over that, you got overtime. Well, that's been broken down, as has the whole idea of getting overtime. And what's surprising to me is when I talk to people and go, do you get overtime? A lot of people don't. And that, quite remarkable. And as we're moving into the era of everyone's their own boss because we've all got a gig economy job, overtime is getting further and further away. So I thought it would be an interesting conversation because the good folks over at Capital and Maine have done a 4-part series on what is the death of overtime. That's why I've asked Marcus Barham to come talk with us. Marcus is the senior project editor there at Capital and Maine, their website, capitalandmaine.com. Marcus, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I think back to this, when I started working, like I said, the idea was you worked 8 hours, you got overtime after 8 hours. There was none of this, you got to get to 40 before you got any overtime.
Right.
And there certainly was none of this, oh, hey, punch off the clock and work for free off the clock and we'll catch you next week, like we saw happen with that Taco Bell case.
Right. And like you said, I mean, the 8-hour day was sacrosanct, but also the idea of time and a half. That's embedded in our work culture. Time and a half. You work 40 hours a week, you work more than 8 hours a day, you get time and a half for every hour you work beyond that. And I think people don't realize, this whole story came out of doing our income inequality reporting. And I remember looking into it and coming across this statistic, this stunned me, that in 1975, something like 62% of salaried workers in America qualified for overtime. And today, only 15% do. And that number was actually down to about 7% during the Obama years. That's just stunning. That means tens of millions of Americans have lost out on overtime pay,
and are
which basically means that their wages have gone down. Because if you're working 50 hours a week and you're making the same amount per hour and you're not getting overtime, your hourly wage has declined.
Yeah, and this is just another 25%. Way that when you look at this, is another way that the working class is getting screwed. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a way that the wealth class in corporate America has been able to keep wages down. Because you're right, and this is part of the death of the meritocracy. Because everyone keeps saying, we're pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you work harder. Well, in the old days, you could work harder. You worked more hours, you got more money. It was simple. It was that idea of a meritocracy. Whereas now, as you've pointed out, so many people are working extra hours or working longer and harder for actual less money. It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. People are working harder than ever. I think something like half of Americans say they work more than 40 hours a week. And there's like another percentage which is kind of like 20% of people work more than 50 hours a week. That's a lot of hours. And the vast majority of them are not getting overtime. And what kind of stood out to me was how part of the reason for that is that they haven't raised this threshold they use, that anybody who makes below a certain amount qualifies for overtime in general. And that amount in 75 was 8,000. So $8,060, which back then was, pretty low, but still it was like that was pretty common for a lot of Americans. But that stayed the same. It stayed at that same level instead of being increased every few years like they were doing for decades. Going back to the 30s, they kept it at that same level until 2004. So there are people in 2002, 2003 who, if you made more than $8,000, which is like the vast majority of Americans, at such a pitiful salary, you didn't get overtime. And then they finally raised it to 23,000, which is still pretty low. And then under the Obama years, they tried to double it, and industry came in, like hellfire, and lobbied that to death. And the judge ended up overturning it in Texas. And then eventually, actually, Trump increased it to 35,000, which is still, vastly inadequate. And the big problem people have with the Trump increase is that it's not pegged to inflation. So it's not automatically going to increase.
Right.
It's been 35,000 for the last 3 years.
No, and it's what they do. They'll give you a little crumb, and then it just gets eroded away by inflation. It's what we've done with any minimum wage increase. I mean, the last time we've raised the minimum wage in this country has been well over a decade. I think it's 12, almost 13 years ago now, since we've raised the minimum wage. And again, it did not bother to peg it to inflation so that it didn't get eaten away by inflation. But you point out that Obama tried. They tried to take it up to 47,000, which I thought would have been a reasonable rate. And like you said, corporations went crazy. We can't possibly pay that. And I'm going, nobody said you have to pay that. You just don't get to abuse your workers anymore. You then just have to pay them for the hours that they work. And this comes back down to the question of what kind of an economy do we want to have? Do we want to have the kind of gig economy that they keep throwing at us? Do they want to have the kind of scenario that they keep throwing at us? Or do we want to have one where people can work and get ahead? And that seems to be where we are in this moment. For me, and again, I come back to this, the sad reality is, when you look at this, it comes down to a bunch of these questions of what kind of an economy are we going to have? Are we going to have one where work is rewarded and work is something that we're willing to reward? And I say this whenever a president comes online, whenever someone new comes, will this be the administration that pushes for this? And I think Biden has done that. So it's good to see you back there.
I mean, it remains to be seen what happens. I mean, to be honest, like one thing that kind of stood out in the story was how actually the only increases in the last 40 years happened under Republican presidents, under Bush Jr. and under Trump. And even though they were very inadequate and there was all kinds of exemptions that they shoved in there, they actually did increase it. Whereas under the 8 years of Clinton, 8 years of Obama, it didn't happen. The Clinton years, they were distracted by other priorities. Overtime increase was sort of, pushed to the back burner. Obama tried, like you said, and they failed. So it's sort of sad how these Democratic administrations didn't really prioritize it enough. And they focused on one or two things they thought they could accomplish and focused 100% on those and kind of ignored overtime. And by like the Obama years, people tell me that they waited until the very last second.
Yeah.
And by then it was almost like too late. It was just too difficult to build up enough of a legal argument, enough popular will behind it, and they lost.
No, and there was a bunch of those things. I mean, on the way out the door, they were doing a bunch of things trying to prioritize stuff that eventually just got stopped and thrown out. And you're right. Then Trump came in and of course scaled them way back. And then, a lot of things
Yeah.
got eviscerated, and then we're able to say, look what we did, and that's why I'm struggling with a lot of what Democrats do, because they don't prioritize working class values the way I think they should.
No, and one example of that is that somebody I talked to who headed up the wage and hour division, which is the part of the Department of Labor that handles overtime violations and overtime wages. And the woman who headed it up told me that in the Clinton years, she remembers being in the White House and looking around the room, during a meeting, and realizing she was the only one in the room, or one of two people in the room, who had ever punched in at a job, like a real working class job where you punch in. And the rest of them were all like eggheads and worked at think tanks, academics. They were thinking theoretically. They didn't have that working experience.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a priority for them. And that stood out to me as such an interesting anecdote that kind of crystallizes how, like you said, the working class issues, the working American issues are not a priority.
Yeah, I don't see that any different with the Obama administration either. I mean,
no.
I had the opportunity to shake his hands twice, and those are hands that never did a day's work.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's absolutely true. I mean, you can tell. And so with Biden, it remains to be seen. I mean, right now it seems like there's something is supposed to be happening. Like it could happen this month or next month, where they do overhaul the overtime wage rule, which hopefully they're pushing for a big increase. Some people are actually pushing for it to be increased to 85,000, which I'm sure won't happen, but definitely higher than what Obama had proposed, the 47,000. But there's a lot of different priorities now, obviously, for the administration, and it looks like it also could be kicked down the road to the fall. Yeah. So it's difficult to say at this point.
Yeah, right around the time when Republicans take over the House, or possibly the Senate, possibly. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Marcus Barham. He's a special project editor over at Capital in Maine. You can check out their work, capitalinmaine.com, where you can see this 4-part series on overtime. Now, this is where, in talking about, changing that threshold, what I find interesting is, the argument back then is we can't possibly do this stuff because, it's just too costly. And the argument to me was always, well, you don't have to work an employee 100 hours a week. I look at the fast food industry. You give them a cute little title, you call them management, and now you could pay them. Back then it was $23,600. Now it's something like $35,000. And now they can work 60, 70, 80 hours a week and be exempt from overtime. You cannot do that. You can hire somebody else. And for me, the argument of having strong overtime rules are, one, good family values. We're not abusing people. Workers work, 40 hours. Maybe we start talking about a wage that people can survive on 40 hours. And more employment. More people get jobs. I think that's a good thing. There's a lot of positives.
And better productivity. You see higher productivity with workers who are not working 50 hours a week, 56 hours a week. There's more productivity. So you have more efficient workers. Isn't that what companies want? And then another issue that ties in there is that this whole idea of it impacting business expenses and how their costs will go through the roof, and all the usual hue and cry about how it's going to hurt businesses, which the Chamber of Commerce and all those groups always raise. That hasn't really proven true. I mean, in California, they have pretty strong overtime laws, and they've done studies looking at what's happened since, like, their threshold is about 56,000. So it's pretty good. A lot of people cover their overtime, and the number of businesses has expanded. They expanded overtime to farm workers who were originally exempt, going back to the 30s, because of a deal that FDR made with, the racist Southerners who didn't want to have their black farm workers included. Anyways, California made them qualify for overtime, and they didn't see a decrease in farms. There was actually an increase in farms across the state. So you didn't have that doom and gloom scenario that business always talks about.
Yeah. It just makes them work a little bit more efficiently. And like, for instance, right now there's talk of, overtime for truck drivers, which I think would be incredible. It's something that's long overdue, because it would force these employers and these contractors to use the resource of our truck drivers a lot more efficiently, and not let them, just sit for hours on end, either at the ports or at warehouses and languish in places. We would actually use them because you're paying them. Time is money. But as long as it's someone else's time and someone else's money, these people don't care. this is where I think the overtime changes would be a wonderful addition to our supply chain issues.
Definitely. And I mean, there's a lot of industries where you wouldn't expect that to happen, but even in like computer program, you see a lot of overtime abuse. The gaming industry had a whole scandal in Silicon Valley about 10 years ago, where workers were like working 90-hour weeks. It was insane, and not getting overtime. And, and more traditional work, obviously, like home health care workers.
So how much overtime did you put into this 4-part series? Because this is...
Good question. I'm talking to my lawyers. No, it was a lot of overtime. That's for sure. It's very ironic.
Well, I hope folks will check it out. Right. It is a great series, like all of your series have been. You guys are spot on the money, and talking about working class issues. I think really important the work you guys do there at Capital in Maine, and I appreciate you taking time for us. I hope you'll come back and share more of the work that you guys do.
Well, we're going to stay on top of it. We're going to see what happens with overtime. We're going to keep pushing the administration, and I'm going to check in with DOL and find out by June, July, August, what's happening. So.
Good stuff. I hope you'll come back and give us some thoughts. Marcus Barham, the special projects editor there at Capital in Maine. Again, make sure you check out their website, capitalinmaine.com. Love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the overtime issue? Should we have people working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, making $35,000 a year? Or should you have to pay overtime? Should you have to treat people with dignity and respect? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, I remember the whole Obama era overtime fight. And look, he's right. The sad reality is Democrats haven't been great for working people. They haven't. I want them to be. And Republicans have been horrible. They've thrown some crumbs when, just to say, look what we've done. This is one of those moments where, steel the spine, do some work. It's frustrating. But I go back to that era when Obama put forward the overtime thing. And look, I was in favor of it because I knew people who were working in the fast food industry who were literally working 60, 70 hours a week, making $23,600 a week or a year, a week, 23,600 a year. Working all those hours and not getting ahead. But they had the shiny little name tag, assistant manager. And now and now they're going away from even giving the name tags. Now they're just saying you're your own boss. So minimum wage laws, maximum hour laws, safe working condition laws, unemployment workers comp, Social Security, Medicare. None of that stuff applies to the workforce that they're now fostering. And this is where the political realm has got to really speak up. Because corporate America has figured out that desperation gets people doing things that they may not want to do. And what's interesting is I get a whole bunch of people who are yelling at me, well, no, I want to be a gig worker. Yeah, I want to take on all the responsibility. I want to take on all of the risk and and not get all of the reward. Corporate America sells a nice game. I've watched this play out over the decades. In the trucking industry, where I've spent most of my life, I've watched them take people and sell them that American dream. Oh, you're going to be your own boss. You're going to be the king of the open road. You're going to own your own truck someday. But you just have to work for a little bit less now. Pay the lease fees, pay the insurance, pay the fuel, pay the tolls, pay the breakdown costs, pay everything up front here, and absolve us from the risk. And of course, pay us. I mean, that's really where corporate America wants it. They want their workforce to pay them for the privilege to work for them. And that's kind of where this gig economy thing's taken us. It's really bizarre. I do want to finish up this segment with Amazon. Evidently, Amazon shareholders have shot down the idea of having an independent audit of working conditions. Now, remember, we talked about this earlier in the week. Amazon, they are the industry leader in injuries. They are number one. They represent, about a third of all warehouse workers in the country, yet account for about half of all injuries. That's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive indeed. So there are people saying, hey, we should be looking at what Amazon's doing. Well, there's a call for an independent investigation. The shareholders said, no, don't think that's a good idea for us because, well, I think that what's going to end up happening is they're going to want to make some changes that won't be as profitable for shareholders, but will be good for workers' health. And ultimately, shareholders and the profiteers, I don't know that they really care too much about. I don't think they care too much about people's health. Just kind of throwing that out there. I don't think they really care too much about your kids, my kids, your coworkers. Not really. Not when you stop and you think about in the grand scheme of things. No. That's the scary part of where we are. And for me, the reality is we should have government oversight ensuring that those are safe working conditions. We should have unions ensuring that those workers are protected. Those workers should have the say. I sit and I think about where we are, where I started my working life, and where we are today, and how the pendulum has swung way to the side of corporate America, which is why, in Illinois, one of the things that I'm thrilled to see is that there's on the ballot in November, there's a constitutional amendment being proposed to ensure via their constitution the right to collectively bargain. The moneyed interests have been for years trying to get in state constitutions across the country the no rights at work agenda to destroy collective bargaining rights. This is finally a state going, hey, you know what? We're going to demand that the right to collectively bargain be a fundamental right of our Constitution. The right of workers to come together for better wages, hours, and conditions, like at Amazon. The fact that these shareholders said, we don't really care about the workers. They're just negatives on a balance sheet. We don't care about their health. We don't care about their safety. We don't care about their family. We don't care about their kids. We don't care about them. We care about their productivity. We care about how much they're doing, how many boxes they're moving, how much cash they're putting into our pockets. That's what we care about. That's what this is about. Nothing more. They don't want to make changes to the system because it's working perfectly for them because they're making tons of money. Not working so well for the workers. And that's kind of the frustrating part in this. We don't have the functional system in place. Now look, there are people who are trying to organize, and good for them, good on them. And I stand with them. But our laws are so badly broken. the pendulum so far to the extreme. And this is why, again, on all of these issues, we've got to be standing together shoulder to shoulder. We've got to be the ones to say enough already, and mean it. Angrily mean it. Just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available wherever you get your podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, everywhere in between. Like, subscribe, share, comment, all of that. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1986. That was the day that more than 5 million people participated in Hands Across America. The event was organized to raise money to combat the problems of homelessness and hunger in the United States. People agreed to donate $10 to stand in their place in line for 15 minutes. The line was supposed to link people hand in hand from New York City through 17 states to Long Beach, California. The event gained support of corporate donors, including the Coca-Cola Company and Citibank. Initially, the plan drew the ire of President Ronald Reagan, who claimed, quote, "I don't believe that there is anyone going hungry in America by reason of denial or lack of ability to feed them. It is by people not knowing where or how to get this help." The president refused to acknowledge how factors like the loss of industrial jobs and the decline of labor unions contributed to families having hard times making ends meet. Eventually, President Reagan got on board, forming part of the chain in Washington, D.C. He was joined in line across the country by everyone from Oprah to Chewbacca and Mickey Mouse. The event was projected to raise $50 million, but not everyone turned in their pledged contributions, and staffing costs ate into profits. In the end, the project raised about $20 million. In 2015, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development reported that there were more than 500,000 people homeless in the United States. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I never dreamed of growing up to be a political activist commentator, but here I am, and it worked out pretty well for me. I've been lucky enough to have a voice in public matters and eke out a modest living running my mouth as an independent populist agitator. Still, I have to confess to the sin of job envy. Not in the sense of being resentful, but regretful about my own inability to lift the trade of journalistic commentary to the heights attained by a small, feisty collection of unique public opinionators, political cartoonists. In framing issues and rallying people to think and act, these journalists have an unfair advantage over us mere word crafters. They can literally draw a picture to make their point. They reach masses viscerally as well as cerebrally, and visceral usually outpunches cerebral. Editorial cartooning is a profession made up largely of progressive mavericks who enter the social, political, cultural fray with an abundance of anti-establishment audacity, an eye for irony, fondness for the underdog, and an ability to laugh at absurdity, plus artistic talent. Because cartooning is an expression of the human spirit that's been irrepressible since cave drawings, generation after generation of pen and ink champions of democracy blossomed. The general public's appreciation and demand for the cartoonist's unblinking honesty and satire have never flagged, even increasing whenever the artists come under public assault by autocrats, plutocrats, screwballs, and assorted other censors. These graphic editorial artists matter. Again and again, they've roused the public to rise up and put down corporate and political scoundrels, incrementally advancing our nation's democratic possibilities. As in the natural world, though, even the most beneficial creatures can be driven to extinction. This is Jim Hightower saying, check your own local newspaper. Are your favorite cartoonists still there?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and we've seen messages from athletes and actors saying it's okay to seek help. I keep going. What about normal people? It's great. It's great that actresses and athletes, seem to think it's okay, because it is. It's okay if you need someone to talk to, if you need someone to help you get through a rough patch. Because look, life seems to be getting a lot more stressful these days with everything coming at us, the pandemic, all the stuff that's in the news. I mean, every day, it's something. So seeking out someone to talk to. I don't know, especially if you've hit a rough spot, not feeling right. I don't think that should be viewed negatively. And that's why I wasn't surprised to find out that our friends over at the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers have a helpline for their members. That's why I've asked Alex Jacoby to come talk with us. She's the Assistant Director of the Member Assistance Program there with the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. Their website, bacweb.org. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick. I'm really, really glad to be here today.
So,
Grateful for the opportunity.
We see these messages all the time, Alex. Athletes saying, it's okay to get help, it's okay. But we don't see that coming for average, everyday working folks. So I'm happy to see your unions stepped up and said, hey, look, you know what? If you hit a rough patch, talk to somebody. There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the biggest things that we can do to combat stigma is to normalize these issues. Obviously, mental health struggles, substance use issues, I mean, that's maybe more at the severe or clinical end of things, but just everyday family conflict, burnout, anxiety, financial distress, things that are just hitting us really hard and acutely now with the pandemic and political upheaval. These are issues that impact all of us. And so our department exists. It is way predated the pandemic, of course, over the last few years, but we exist to kind of be a safety net for our members that are struggling with these types of issues and don't really know where else to go, where else to turn. It's a very, very daunting healthcare system. It can even be daunting for licensed mental health professionals like myself, those that have a lot of experience navigating the system. So for individuals that are not well versed in identifying these resources, accessing these resources, we serve to bridge that gap and to kind of facilitate that process.
Yeah, now this is something beyond just having a buddy at the union to talk to. You're actually somebody who has some real training, a real professional who's going to help navigate the system and get, especially if someone needs some actual help. I mean, there's one thing having, hey, I need someone to talk to. I need to, just a vent to work through some things. There's that. But if someone really needs help, you're clearly qualified and trained to help in that way, right?
Yep, I am a licensed mental health professional. Our department is staffed by licensed mental health professionals. My colleague is licensed mental health professional. We have a lot of training and experience, not just in clinical matters, but in that kind of niche area where clinical matters meet the union world and the labor world. And so we bring that expertise to the work that we do, to the conversations that we have with our members, which often surprises them in terms of how accessible it is and how comfortable they almost immediately feel in working with us. I think sometimes the process can seem really daunting and overwhelming, which is why they might shy away from it entirely. I talk to members all the time who we might be the first mental health professional, first therapist they've ever talked to in their entire lives. And they might have an idea of what that might look like or feel like. It might be incredibly intimidating. They might feel incredibly comfortable. We might present as, or their fear that we might present as really kind of stiff and unapproachable. And the only feedback we ever get is the exact opposite, that even just in that initial conversation that they have, that they feel immediate relief, even just from the conversation itself, without any actual implementation of treatment yet, if treatment is indicated for their particular presenting issue.
Yeah, I think of some of my big burly bricklayer friends, and they're people too. They when they've got problems, they got problems like anybody else. They've got that rough, tough exterior, but on the inside, they got problems like anybody else. And as I was thinking about having this conversation with you, I think back to some of those friends and some of the struggles that they've had with addiction, with relationships, with just life in general, and to have programs like this, which I gotta think. And I'm thinking about a friend from Philadelphia who wrote a book and really shared his life struggles. I got to think a big part of this came out of those struggles that members shared and kind of pushed for programs like yours to exist.
Yep. I'm glad to hear stories like that, because I think that's a part of the work that we do, re-narrating what it means to be strong and tough. Unfortunately, kind of part of the stigma with addressing mental health. And I know that term in and of itself can be really polarizing, but just any issue that, might be considered mental illness or in the periphery of mental illness, just everyday stress, the challenges that come along with dealing with life on life's terms. None of us come out unscathed. We tend to think of that in addressing those types of issues as weak. And that's a really unfortunate stigma associated with looking at this more vulnerable human, but vulnerable part of yourself. And really, it's quite the exact opposite, that it takes an incredible and immense amount of courage to address these types of issues, to tap into the part of yourself that acknowledges that you might need help or support. We are, collectivists. We subscribe to collectivism. We can't do life alone. We're very adjacent to the philosophy of the union world, right? What we do. So to be able to kind of come forward, your friend that wrote the book, I commend that person extremely for being able to show up and do that, because that is no easy feat, and it's not a demonstration of cowardice. It takes a lot of strength to say, here's my situation, I'm confronting it. And the very act of doing that alone in and of itself for so many people is healing. Because so many people carry so much shame. Go ahead, sorry.
No, for him, he suffered from addiction, and sadly, he's since passed. But I know a lot of my building trades friends, addiction is one of the things that in the work world overall, I mean, addiction is a struggle for a lot of people. And to have access to someone to maybe help, especially if you're at the beginning of that struggle, so that maybe you can get the help at the beginning so you don't have, a lifetime of this, which is why I think it's important to do this. So, as you're going through this, and clearly you're not going to give me examples of this, that, but what seems to be, the big struggles for folks, who may be listening going, I've got problems, but maybe they don't rise to the level that I need to call Alex and bother you with my problems. What's that look like?
We get it all. We are like a catch-all. So some of the major issues, as you mentioned, that impact individuals in the trades, individuals in the construction industry are, as you noted, depression, suicidality, substance use disorders, alcohol use disorders, but that is far from the only types of issues that we work with. We work with people that are confronting, just everyday kind of generalized worry, but non-clinical anxiety, to extreme severe anxiety, panic disorder, stress, burnout, grief, trauma, PTSD, issues related to perhaps non-traditional work hours, seasonal unemployment. I can't remember if I mentioned it already or not, but just general.
So you're basically just running the gamut.
Oh yeah, we run the full gamut, because we really help anyone that is struggling with anything acutely or chronically that is impacting their quality of life. It's really a service that supports individuals in being able to overcome any barriers that are impeding their ability to function in their personal lives, their professional lives, or any combination of the two.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Alex Jacoby. She's the Assistant Director of Member Assistance Program there with the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. You want to check out their website. bacweb.org is that website. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. If you're a member of the Bricklayers Union, make sure you check out your union's resources. And this is, again, one of those things as being a member. And this is why, again, I all of my non-union friends, this is one of those reasons why you join and form unions, for programs like this to help each other, to help your coworkers, to help brothers and sisters. That old ideal of an injury to one being an injury to all, or concern of one. This is one of those concerns to help each other out. So I got to ask you, how did you get involved in? How did you get to this? Because as someone who you're clearly trained, clearly knowledgeable. How do you get to the building trades world?
Yep. I'm going to answer that question in 1 second. Really quickly, I do want to just add to what you just noted, which is something I don't think I'd mentioned earlier, that this benefit is entirely confidential. I think a lot of times people might be nervous about contacting or getting in touch with us. Hey, are you going to tell my business agent or my rep that, I'm calling, or let my employer know what's going on. We operate just like any other mental health facility or clinic. We're just in-house with the union. So we, HIPAA applies, federal laws apply, and everything that we talk about or discuss with members, unless otherwise requested and paperwork needs to be signed, but is entirely confidential. I just wanted to make sure that I...
No, I see again, there's, I assumed that, and that was my fault for, facts not in evidence, my assumption, and I'm glad you clarified that. So that's a perfect thing.
That's typically just a barrier to treatment or calling that we see sometimes. So I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. But maybe where I just went is a good segue into your previous question, or answering your previous question, which was how I got into this world. And so I think many mental health professionals maybe identify themselves as, or identify with being empaths. They're hearty and they're soulful, and that's very much me. That's kind of always been in my nature. But it's a calling for a lot of people. I know that sounds really, really, really cliche, but it was true for me. Just very much a calling. I knew I wanted to be in this field. And then without getting too much into a discussion that's maybe outside of this realm, I think when politically things started to turn over the last few years and get a little bit chaotic, I was pulled to come to DC and maybe be a little bit closer to the action. And I have always liked working with maybe a non-traditional setting. And so when I came across this opportunity, working for the union and in the labor movement is so adjacent to my personal values, what we do professionally, it was just magic.
So I get it. You're a fighter. You're somebody who wants to get in the mix, ball up the digits, throw some. I get it. Perfect for being in the labor movement and someone who out there wants to help somebody. I love it. I think it's a perfect story.
It was meant to be.
So, last line of questioning I've got for you, because, again, with this being Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm wanting to highlight the fact that there's nothing wrong with reaching out and seeking help in a moment of need. Because, we all reach a point, and hopefully we don't reach a breaking point, but we all reach a point where we need someone to talk to. What's the advice for folks? I mean, I know myself. I like to think, hey, I can handle any situation. I'm a tough guy. I'm your typical alpha male. I can deal with it. But sometimes you just need somebody to confide in, someone to vent to a little bit, someone to unburden to.
Absolutely.
And I think this is part of that, right?
It's counterintuitive, right? We think that I'll just deal with this on my own. It's kind of, culturally normed in this world that folks might suffer in silence, and that will be the path to relief. Paradoxically, the opposite is true. You not only are dealing with the thing you're dealing with and the initial or primary source of your pain or suffering, but then on top of it, the shame around it, the internalization of it just exacerbates symptoms and stress. It does nothing for relief. So just looking at or being willing to question what feels intuitively true about how we feel better in and of itself can maybe help you overcome the barrier to reaching out for help. Again, not to be redundant, but it really kind of maybe seems like it would make sense that I'm good. I'll just think my way out of this, or not think my way out of this, right? I'll just not feel it. I'll compartmentalize it. That just exacerbates the issues. I cannot stress enough how normal and common it is to struggle acutely, chronically, just because, a lot of us have really kind of black or white thinking about mental illness or mental health, that a person is either can't get out of bed, just so severely in pain, just totally bedridden, just
sane or insane.
Or exactly, sane or insane, or they're great. There's nothing to look at. And that could not be further from the truth. So undermining your own ideas about what mental health really is. And that's why we encourage people to contact us, because we really, really demystify that for people. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that were struggling with clinical depression that didn't even know that they were struggling with clinical depression. I mean, they see themselves and are functional, or they're high functioning, but they're struggling and they're suffering. So really, really kind of demystifying what it is, what mental illness is, and how to get it. We facilitate that process. And there was one other thing that I wanted to say, and I lost it.
Yeah. So then, because I'm listening to all this. So there's got to be one of those moments where you go, all of this comes together where, there's a story that you can leave us with that this is the reason. This is that moment that leave us with that story.
Yep. I'm going to do the same thing I did again a few moments ago, which is say the thing that I remembered. It came back to me, and then I'm going to answer your question.
Of course.
I'm really good at that. I don't know. It's a strength or a weakness, depending on how you look at it. So a lot of people think of the absence of mental illness as the same thing as mental health. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So we exist as a benefit to help people improve their quality of life. You don't want to just go through life without pain. You want to feel good. That's true physically, and we know that that's true emotionally and behaviorally. So we want people, even if they aren't struggling with severe mental illness, to understand that we're a space for them as well. One moment that really, really stood out to me when I first came to the union, or I shouldn't say first came to the union, maybe within my first year at the union, I was at a local leaders meeting, and a gentleman approached me who I had never seen before, I didn't have, I didn't recognize him. And he came up to me and he said, "You don't know me. We spoke about 6 months ago. That conversation completely changed my life." This was an individual who at that time needed to get into detox and ultimately into inpatient rehabilitation. And we facilitated that process and got to see the journey and aftermath of where he started to where he is. And this is still somebody I keep in touch with to this day. He's thriving, and he just, without congratulating ourselves too much, he regularly says he owes his life to
That's a great story.
So
that's a great story, and hopefully there are more folks that reach out. Alex, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing your stories, and keep up the great work. I think it's fabulous what you guys do. Good stuff.
Thank you so much, Rick. Thank you for having us on. We're so glad to be here.
Thanks so much, Alex. Alex Jacoby, she is the Assistant Director of the Member Assistance Program there at the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Crafts. If you're a member, make sure you check out the website, bacweb.org. If you're a non-member, you're not a member yet, maybe check it out and figure out how to become. This is, again, one of those reasons that I keep telling people. This is the reason you become a union member. Just a thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available. Wherever you get yours, from iTunes to iHeart, Podbean to Stitcher, everywhere in between. Make sure you grab it. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Unions were created to make living conditions just a little better than they were before they were created. And the union that does not manifest that kind of interest in human beings cannot endure. Those were the words of Philip Murray. Born on this day in labor history, the year was 1886. Philip Murray was born in Blantyre, Scotland, the son of a union coal miner. Philip followed his father into the mines when he was only 10 years old. At the age of 16, he traveled to Pennsylvania with his father in search of work in the Pittsburgh area. They earned enough money mining to send for the rest of their family. As a young man, Murray was fired for assaulting his boss. Murray believed the boss was cheating him when he weighed the coal. His fellow miners went on strike to support him, but he and his family were evicted from their company home. The experience convinced Murray that the only justice for workers was through the power of the union. In 1912, the United Mine Workers Union appointed Murray to their National Executive Board. At the age of 33, he became National Vice President of the United Mine Workers under President John L. Lewis. He was considered to be Lewis's right-hand man until the two split on the question of the role of unions during World War II. In 1936, Murray was trusted with an important new effort, leading the Steelworkers Organizing Committee as its first president. Under Murray's leadership, the Steelworkers Organizing Committee chartered more than 1,000 union locals by the end of the next year. Just 1 week after the historic Flint sit-down strike that forced General Motors to recognize the UAW members' right to unionize, on March 2, 1937, the Steelworkers Organizing Committee signed its landmark agreement with U.S. Steel, turning the company-led union into a member-led union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Now, I listened to Alex, talk about their program, and this is, again, in this moment, this kind of discussion about mental health and mental health awareness, and with this being Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought it was an important discussion to have around the idea of working people, taking control of their mental health and taking control of how you deal with it, especially with all of the stimulus, all of the horrible news every day. I mean, again, I look at today, with the shootings and all of the division and it's tough out there, and the reality, and I think back to this friend that we had on the program a number of times years ago, who struggled mightily in silence for years, for decades, and struggled with with depression, with suicidal thoughts, and drug and alcohol problems, and broken relationships and broken families, just all kinds of turmoil and a life of regret. And it's just one of those things that you go, you can change that. So it's interesting that the bricklayers, and I know a number of other unions have similar programs for their members. The idea is to reach out and help where you can, to be that front line. And this is what unions have always done. Always been that place where, hey, you got a problem? You go to your union. You go to your business agent. You got to struggle, you go to your steward. You got to struggle, you go to your brothers and sisters. That's part of the communal nature of what unions stand for and are. And this is a pushback of what, the last 40 years of you're on your own, you're an individual, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's what I've pushed back against pretty much my entire working life. And the fact that I like the idea, this idea that we can come together. We can be each other's keeper. We can stand tall for each other. We can do positive things for each other. We can be a decent society with decent people and good thoughts and good outcomes. Imagine that. Imagine that. Kind of makes you wonder. Makes you wonder why the other side keeps trying to rip us apart. Just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Also, if you missed any of today's program or any of our programs, make sure you grab the podcast. It's always there, always available. You can get that at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts. It's virtually everywhere. And if it isn't in a place where you get yours, let us know and we will make sure it gets there because we want to make sure everyone has access to it. I appreciate you being here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much. We'll see you back here again bright and early next time. Thanks so much. See you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.